Aloha, spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek Network. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Sagers, journalist, author, researcher of all things weird. Currently, I can be seen on Travel Channel and Discovery Plus's Paranormal Caught on Camera. New episodes dropping each Thursday, and we're filming more for a 6th season already, so that's good news. And the guest today is a gentleman that I have had the fortune of hosting for at both New York Comic Con, I believe San Diego Comic Con, for a show he created, the horror comedy Stan Against Evil, which ran for 3 seasons. And you will quickly tell that he definitely has a strong and developed horror DNA and also a bizarre sense of comedic timing, which I love. He is a comedian, he's an actor, he's a writer. He was a writer and performer on the Ben Stiller Show. He has been for a long time part of the Simpsons creative team. He appeared on Parks and Rec, Seinfeld, and also we've had Greg Nicotero on this show, and he's been on Creepshow on Shudder. And something that I love about him is he adapted Rod Serling's original Planet of the Apes script for Boom Comics, and he does the Dana Gould Hour podcast, which is incredibly produced and a lot of work, and also the Cinemorph newsletter, where he just geeks out about obscure horror. And so he's a nerd. He's one of us. And without further ado, let me bring him in. Dana. Hey.
God, to hear that, you'd think I would be productive, and yet why do I still hate myself?
Well, I think because you're a creative, that just comes with the deal.
Yeah, that could be true.
So you most recently you're involved with so many things, but you of course just wrapped the 2nd season of Hanging with Dr. Z on YouTube, which is a talk show version, a 70s talk show starring Dr. Zeus as the host from Planet of the Apes. Not Maurice Evans, but Dr. Z.
No. Yeah.
With guests Patton Oswalt, Weird Al Yankovic, Janet Varney, Will Forte, a lot of folks.
Yeah.
It's definitely a concept that seems like it started as a joke, and then you let the joke go on too long.
Well put. Yeah, I had done the origin of it. I'll try to give you the telescope version. The origin of it was a sketch I wrote for the Ben Stiller Show in 1992. And it was Planet of the Apes, the musical, a commercial for the show. Before The Simpsons did it, but I had nothing to do with the Simpsons version, and theirs was better than my version. I did go to the Simpsons later, but those are parallel and unconnected. I believe David Cohen was heavily involved in the Simpsons version. The Ben Stiller Show and then there was another sketch with it that was Dr. Zeus doing a one-man show about Mark Twain. These are like commercials for plays that were coming through town. You know how they do that when Hamilton comes to town, they do a commercial for it. And I only wrote it because I wanted to do ape makeup and be in it and do it. It's the only reason you write stuff is to be in it and do it. We got canceled before we got a chance to do the sketch. Cut to 10, 20 years later, it was 2010 or something. I was talking to John Hodgman, who was doing an internet thing about Dr. Zeus with Mark Twain, because he found a picture of one of the actors from Planet of the Apes. It wasn't Maurice Evans. It was the actor that played the president of the assembly, James Whitmore, reading Mark Twain's biography. And he was like, somebody send me Dr. Zeus doing Mark Twain. Nobody could do it. We were talking about something on the phone completely unrelated. And I said, that's so funny. I wrote that sketch 100 years ago. He said, well, do you want to do it for my show at Sketchfest? And my first response was like, no. It sounds like a lot of work. But then I thought well, no, I have access. I'm friends, as you said, I'm very good friends with Greg Nicotero and his special effects company, KNB Effects. They're all my friends. And And I got greedy as a comedian because I wanted to hear that laugh. You know, like I knew when I walked out on, I knew two things. When I walked out on stage, there would be a laugh. And then when they realized that it wasn't a crappy mask, that it really was the actual makeup from the movie, and that they really were seeing Dr. Zeus live, that there would be a much bigger laugh. And I got very greedy to get that. And so I called Greg and we hooked it up and we ended up doing it. And you can see that on YouTube. And that's exactly what happened. And then it just kind of rolled on from there, where I would do an appearance of Dr. Zeus at like my friends would do like a political benefit, and I would host it as Dr. Zeus. And then AMC called me, Turner Classic Movies called me and said, we're doing Planet of the Apes as a Fathom event. Could Ben Mankiewicz interview you as Dr. Zeus? And I was like, yes. and that was where the character started to form, of him being this sort of showbiz raconteur who just knew everybody and had been everywhere. And that's really where the character kind of developed.
So the Simpsons episode, A Fish Called Selma, that was 95, 96, I think.
Yeah.
So the fact that, you weren't there yet, but you had already written it. So you got there first, even though the sketch didn't air first.
Yeah, and that happened. I mean, that happened. That happens. The ideas are, you don't have to be. Hanging with Dr. Z is an incredibly obscure idea. Planet of the Apes, the musical, is not.
Why, as far as characters, why Dr. Zeus as opposed to a Cornelius or a,
Great question. Great question. Because as a kid, my favorite character was Caesar. Like from, Conquest is like a 12-year-old boy made into a movie. It's just like apes and shooting guns. It's brilliant. But for some reason, because Dr. Zeus is so arrogant as a character, I mean, he's basically Mitch McConnell, that I found it, I just, and the timbre of his voice, it was just funny to me. It just like to see that kind of arrogant. Cornelius is a very sort of timid character, and sort of and quiet and reserved, and Dr. Zeus is much more flamboyant and just orange. It's just like really bright and big. And because he wasn't my favorite as a kid, I think kids gravitate towards the chimpanzees in those movies because they're kind and, Dr. Zeus just sort of fit. It's like in Star Wars, like if you were going to have a Star Wars character host a talk show, you would go to Darth Vader because he's the most interesting. Like I'd much rather see Darth Vader guest host the Tonight Show than Luke Skywalker.
Right. The Mitch McConnell comment, though. I mean, because Dr. Z
kind of look like
is more likable, at least.
Yes, he's
as a host.
Yes, and that's an interesting story, and I have to give credit to my friend Rob Cohen, who created the show with me, and another friend of ours named Pete Aronson. All of those people were also involved in Stand Against Evil, and Rob and I were office mates on the Ben Stiller show. We go back that far, Rob had the idea during the pandemic, let's do it as a talk show. We can do it as green screen, so it's COVID safe. We were, the pandemic had been going on for a while, and we lived near each other, and we were bored out of our skulls. And so it came out of that, and it was Rob's idea. So we described it to our friends as it's between Two Ferns, but I'm an orangutan. But outside of that, it's just between Two Ferns. And Janet Varney, the co-star of Stand Against Evil, was the first guest, and I'm really grateful it was Janet for many reasons. We started like Between Two Ferns with it being very passive aggressive and cutty, and it just didn't feel right to me. One, I'm not good at that. It's not my personality, and it didn't feel true to the character. And then Rob Cohen wrote on a big piece of poster board and put it right out of my eye line, Sammy, because he's Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
it's not crappy. It's everybody's the greatest. You know, every guest he has is his favorite guest. It's like, it's just that great. And that's where the 70s vibe really came from. It was just like, it's back when before showbiz was, I can swear on this, right?
Yeah.
It's before showbiz was shitty.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just like, no, everybody loves everybody. It's like, you're the greatest guest I've ever had until the next guest. And then they're the greatest guest I've ever had. And I just found that one, because it was, it was before the election. It was the pandemic. It was a very plangent, unpleasant time. And I just loved the breath of fresh air that was just like, it was just positive and friendly. And it was just a great place to go comedically. And the character, boy, like, when you go to get your glasses fixed and they get the right prescription on that little thing and it just click and it right away. It was like that. And the great thing about Janet is she's such a good improviser. She's so facile that we were neck and neck. Like we both felt it immediately and just ran with it. A lesser skilled performer wouldn't have caught it that quick. And I was really glad Janet can really throw a fastball. So I was really lucky.
Yeah, it's amazing that it sounds like it was developing as you were shooting, as you're pulling together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the era of showbiz, of these talk show hosts, it seemed like a time when where they could talk about their excesses and these over the top gatherings and parties and whatnot, going to the Playboy Mansion and hanging out at the grotto. They could bring you into these behind the scenes stories and yet somehow make it feel like you're part of it.
Yeah.
Which is just this incredible thing. But for you,
it was less controlled. It was less micromanaged than, the reason that it's set in sort of a time bubble. I mean, the guests are contemporary, the references here, but we just had this theory that like everybody in show business is still alive.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I mean, it's also the era of talk shows that I grew up in, like as a teenager, as a kid in the 70s and late 70s, early 80s. And it was less micromanaged and controlled than talk shows are today. And, like Johnny Carson would talk about getting an offender bender or whatever, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. And that's what I loved. I wanted it to be really loose. And I just loved those, like when Orson Welles would go on Merv Griffin or something, he would just talk about, Joe Cotton and I went over to Susie Flechette's house and Mike Farrell came by on a unicycle. Who rides a unicycle, really? I mean, I just love it. It's just like high school. They're all friends. They all know each other. I just thought that was really cool.
Yes. And, I mean, just the idea of, I don't remember, it's something like I have a nostalgia for a time I didn't really live in. And
me too, yeah. By the way, I mean, my favorite era, like pop cultural era, is like 1966. Like the 60s, just before they got spooky.
Yeah.
And I was 2. I have no memory of it. But I love that. I love that era.
So I'm thinking of another comedian when I listen to some of your references, I also sort of think, and I mean this as a compliment, of Conan O'Brien, another.
Yeah. We're very,
Yeah. So someone that he'll just like throw out these, Carson getting an offender bender out on his way to get a funky banana at the Fun Club or whatever. Who are the comedians that? Because I feel like this is a very specialized set of humor that you can talk about some of these actors and these talk show hosts. Who are the comedians that you can do this with and do these deep dives and not many, and they'll get it. They'll pick up on what you're doing.
I'm going to betray a confidence. I hope the people involved are okay with it. I'm on an email chain of like-minded people that deals specifically with this stuff all the time. Conan.
I suspected you were on that list. I know about this list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm in that list. Yeah. Conan, Patton, Scott Alexander, Larry Karaszewski, Drew Friedman, the cartoonist, the actor Steven Weber, the actor Richard Kind. I don't want to betray a lot of confidences, but yeah, I'm a part of that. I'm a part of that herd.
Yeah.
How did you hear about that?
I think Conan actually mentioned it on his podcast.
Yeah.
He didn't mention you, but you just pick up on the beats, the rhythms of comedy.
I heard him talking about like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's so, and it's funny. The fastest people on that are not famous comedians. It's like, in terms of like obscure references, Cliff Nesteroff, who wrote the book The Comedians, Drew Friedman, the cartoonist, and probably Scott Alexander of Alexander Karaszewski, the screenwriters, are bullwhips in terms of like obscure references. I can't even come close.
Well, what makes for, I guess when you were reaching out to your friends, because I get the sense that a lot of your guests on
they're all
Dr. Z, all friends.
Yeah.
Do they?
It's just people who mistakenly picked up the phone.
Yeah, were they? That's the question. Is, were any of them a harder sell on this than other? Were they just like, all right, this is very much a Dana thing, we're gonna do it?
Yeah, no, they were all great. They're like, what? Great. Yeah, it was terrific, and they're really, everybody comes to play, and sometimes I'm surprised at like how, like, I know Patton is gonna be perfect,
right?
I know Bobcat is gonna. I mean, I talk to Bobcat every day, an hour a day anyway. It's like I know he's gonna get.
Well, you did the comedy tour.
Yeah, we did Joyride together.
Documentary, yeah, Joyride, yeah.
Yeah, and one of my favorite segments of the show is about episode where we just do a deep dive into Elvis's chimp, because that's a talk show I want to watch. I want to hear about scatter. I don't care about it. I don't care about the budget. I don't care about politics. I mean, I care about politics, but not in this context. Yeah, I like weird show business stuff, and Bob's great. But then I'll be like surprised, like, boy, Weird Al Yankovic, man, just knew the tone, knew the joke, knew right where to go every time. I mean, obviously he's talented, but this is such a spooky, weird, specific thing, and he just great. Steven Weber, who's also an emeritus of the email chain, completely just nailed it. It's always a pleasant surprise. The challenge for the show will be there are discussions that to move it off of YouTube into a bigger format, a more accessible format for people. It involved some legality, because Planet of the Apes is owned by Fox, which is owned by Disney. But things worked out really surprisingly well, and it'll be interesting to, provided we are lucky enough to be able to. If we can't move it off YouTube, we will keep it on YouTube, and it will come back. But if we get to expand it, to open it up and to sort of D70s it and keep those things in the show, but also bring in younger guests and make it more contemporary and more open to people. It'll be interesting to see if people who only know about Planet of the Apes kind of over here still latch onto the character, because I don't think you need to really be into it or to know about it to like it. And I'm going to say 80% of the people that liked Austin Powers had never heard of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Yeah.
You don't need to know it to like the character,
I think that's like pop culture osmosis. The idea of, I mean, I know that when I was quite young when Simpsons premiered, and I was watching it, and I was like, I get that they're referencing something here, even if I couldn't pick up on the exact nugget of it. And actually, weirdly enough, that would inspire me to go try to learn the joke or
absolutely, yeah, same thing, yeah, same thing.
And so with this, like, I think that there is just this kind of this absorbed cultural language that we can get into. Even if you don't know Austin Powers, you get the vibe. You kind of tap into the joke without having lived it.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's interesting. Have you learned something new about your guests, these friends, while you're also, by happenstance, you're actually learning something about these people, when you're in the guise of Dr. Z.
Yeah. I'm always impressed that, like, I spent my entire childhood sitting in my bedroom reading Famous Monsters magazine.
Right.
And you tend to think you're the only person that does that because it's so weirdly specific. And it turns out I'm not. There's a ton of people, again, like, I'm always like, people, oh no, you actually know more of this stuff than I do.
Mm-hmm.
That's always great and wonderful. And the other thing that was a pleasant surprise is that people get it and did it. Like, I know Rob Cohen understands what I'm doing, and my close, like Ken Daly and these people that are involved in the show that are my very, very close friends, but no, that other people get it, and that famous people that are fans always astounds me. It's like,
but I mean, you've learned more about your friends through these interviews when you're also goofing as Dr. Z.
Yeah, exactly. I had no idea. I knew Steven Weber was a great actor. I had no idea he was such an improv bullwhip. He was so fast and so great, and so willing to play around. The people I know Jeff Garlin knows every obscure reference that I know. I know that Cohen, but then to see the other people are like Hannah Einbinder is a great example of, like, she had an idea of what she wanted to do, and I kind of recalibrated what I was doing to make it work, and it was one of my favorite episodes.
So let me just shift gears real quickly, because I do want to ask about Stand Against Evil, a show that I quite enjoyed. I think it was a really tight horror comedy. I know it ended after the third season. Do we any movement on that? Any chance of there being a revival?
We had a fourth season I had the fourth season story in my head, and we pitched it as a feature to one of the streamers, and they passed, but it wasn't what was called a hard pass. It was more like, this isn't what we're doing right now. We're trying. I mean, right now everybody is and no one knows what's going on. Everybody's in a panic. I would not be surprised if we got a film. I'd love to do like a film that sort of wrapped it up. It kind of ended okay, but I don't think it's beyond that. I have a really funny idea of how to pick up the story. It wouldn't be, there are two movies that I really want to do. One is the Stand Against Evil feature, which is, we're just kind of waiting for the nod. And the other is, we did a thing for Dr. Z called Del Monte and Flip Flop.
With David Koechner, right?
Koechner, yeah, with Dave. And what it was is, it was like a 70s drive-in cop movie that Dr. Z starred in with Dave. And it was Charlie Varick was the movie that we used for Del Monte and Flip Flop. And then we were matted in. And I really want to write a feature that does that, like that uses, old, not unlike Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, that uses an old cop movie or a dozen old cop movies and puts Dr. Z and Dave Koechner in it, and we do that movie. So it's a green screen movie, which you can do. I think Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid did it really, really well. Yeah. Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow was a completely green screen movie. 300 was basically a green screen movie. And my experiment to see if it would work was the season finale of season 2 of Creepshow, where oh God, I'm blanking on his name, but he invents a machine and goes and lives in the movie Horror Express.
Was it Justin Long? Was that
Justin?
Right.
Yeah, and that was sort of my experiment to see if it could work. And I thought it was great.
Yeah, that was a really great episode too.
Yeah.
And
Greg directed the crap out of it.
Well, with that in mind, that
was a compliment, but
no, and it was
I directed the shit out of
it. It was a great episode. I just overall I've really enjoyed what Greg and Shudder and everybody has done with Creepshow. It's just been
I think
such a blast.
I think as a friend, as Greg's friend, I can say I think that it's a great relief from the Walking Dead, only in the sense that the Walking Dead is this ongoing story in this ongoing world, and to be able to break out of that and do a different genre, different characters, different story, different tone. Greg's really funny, and he doesn't get to do that much on TWD. So I thought it's a great relief valve for him.
Yeah, it is. It's more fun. I mean, I don't know him like you do, but I get that sense that it's fun. So let me ask you,
super funny guy, like super funny, super silly. So,
and it also, as much as Walking Dead is in the zombie realm, Creepshow is it's Nicotero more in the Romero realm. The true Romero.
And he has that's the world of Creepshow is more in Greg's DNA than anything else. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I said at the top, I work on paranormal stuff. I'm a huge paranormal nerd. And for me, it came from reading comic books, reading the monster magazines, and also as a kid catching reruns of In Search Of, watching then Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries, and then the Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown. And then, of course, I don't even know when I first was, and I'm a big Zony. I'm a big Serling fan and Night Gallery fan.
You know who I just met?
Who?
At Monster Palooza?
Oh,
Mark Zachary, who wrote The Twilight Zone Companion. Just met him for the first time.
So for you and Kolchak, who the first I know you kind of had some call outs to Kolchak and Stand Against Evil.
Yeah.
Do you?
And I'm interviewed on the Kino Lorber re-release of the Kolchak series. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, they did a remastered version of the Kolchak. They cleaned it up, and Kino Lorber released it. And there are 2 interviews. Again, it's one of those things like you go, oh, maybe I have made it. I can't tell. The 2 interviews are me and David Chase, who that was his first job, and then he created The Sopranos, just a little show. But it was his first job, and it's a very funny story. If you have a second, I'll tell it.
Yeah.
I was my ex-wife when we were married was worked for an agency and called UTA, and David was a client, David Chase. And so, height of The Sopranos, we're going to the Emmy Awards, and I'm walking in with the UTA party because I'm just the +1. I'm just my wife's date, and I'm walking with David Chase, and I just, everybody's talking about Sopranos, and I go, it's really nice to meet you. I was just watching The Night Stalker last night, and he does this. He goes, "Does it still hold up?" Like perfect writer response. Is it still good? It's like, hell yeah, it still holds up. I mean, and that was, by the way, that day. And again, it's always the same gang. Rob Cohen directed that episode. Rob Cohen, my frequent creative collaborator, and we were like, we got, because we did an X-Files thing, and then I was like, well, if we have Mulder and Scully, we have to have Kolchak. And boy, and they cast a great guy physically, and that guy walked on the set, and it was just electric. Like I couldn't believe it. and we were just pinching each other, and we posted a photo of it on Instagram, and there was Kolchak, Kolchak, Kolchak. It's incredibly obscure to culture now, but to the people that know it, you know, it really rings a bell.
Well,
It's
they
like
tried to.
it's like the Kinks, you know.
Yeah.
It's like it's not the Beatles, it's not the Who, but the people that know about the Kinks are so into the Kinks.
Well, they tried to bring it back a couple years ago with the reboot.
And
I
it
guess.
was awful.
Yeah, it's and it's like I never want to disparage someone else's project, but I miss the spirit of what Kolchak.
Yeah, and it was, and to his the gentleman that did it was the X-Files, and I read. I mean, he just got networked.
Yeah.
You know, they said like literally the day before the pilot started filming, we don't want monsters in it. It's like, what? You know, and it's literally, it was just like one of those things. And it was like, then you don't want to do the show. Right?
Yeah.
Well, we're already filming it. So like, we love James Bond. Could he not be a spy? No, that's the thing. It's what he does. I kind of don't blame him.
What was your take on, I mean, what is your take on all this paranormal spookiness having a lot of the same Sterling Kolchak DNA? What does any of it fascinate you in a real world setting? Do you believe there are things going bump in the night? Is Bigfoot out there? Is
well, some of it is I'm what's the word? I guess I'm agnostic about it. Like in terms of extraterrestrials, I don't even think it's a question anymore. I mean, you know, and just like if you are if you're a rational person, the math alone says that it's nearly impossible for us to be the only form. You know, it's like, it's just, no, I love it. I mean, like, I don't disbelieve anything out of hand. And a lot of it is just, it's fun. I mean, you know, it's like Bigfoot. I hope it's true because it's fun. I don't believe in, you know, it's like, you know, the problem is the slippery slope. Then you get into anti-vaxxing and all that stuff. It's like, no, like anytime somebody thinks that the government is like and I had this argument with my brother, you know, it's like, you know, my brother thinks that the same people that run the post office and the DMV are involved in a massive, elaborate conspiracy. Have you tried to buy stamps, buddy?
Yeah, just the believing that there's that much cohesiveness and communication between bureaucracies.
Yeah.
That's paranormal to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you ever tried to organize a dinner? You know,
right.
It's like,
you know, it's conspiracy theories is now kind of this very ugly thing because because of the political, not even political, just the radical, crazy crackpot connections to it.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be, okay, fine. You know, okay, we want to talk about the moon landing. Okay. You want to talk about,
it's the art bell of it all.
The art bell of it all. That's right. But now it's just associated too much with insurrection.
yeah, guys with an armory. Yeah, exactly. But no, I do. I mean, I've had paranormal experiences that are uncanny. I've had things that are, you know, and I hope it's true. And you talked about like the Twilight Zone and those things. I don't know. It was like if you read about, I think they were called the Southern California Sorcerers, and it was this group of writers in the late 50s and early in the 50s and 60s. Serling, Bradbury, Matheson, George Clayton Johnson, all the Zone guys, Ellison. It was one of those things like the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks coming up at the same time doing. It's like you get these pockets of creativity and a scene happens, and a lot of people have the same idea at the same time, and they are of a level of talent that they can make it happen. And you know, it's like those guys, the Southern California Sorcerers, influenced what we saw in terms of science fiction and fantasy on television and films for the latter half of the 20th century. I mean, all of the great stuff goes back to that very small group of people. And in the same way that the Beatles and the Stones and the Who, there's still the imprint on music is so strong that it's like a body of water. It's like, all the rivers and tributaries go back to the same main source, and then they go off and they find their own way. Even Stephen King was is a descendant of Richard Matheson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can't let you go without doing a follow-up on that question. You can't just say, I've had paranormal experiences and not expect me to follow up with, you're going to have to tell me at least something.
Okay. All right. My mom is very much into astrology and witchcraft and spooky stuff. And as is my soon-to-be second wife. No need for Freud here. I bought my mom this have you ever seen those Christmas tree show, kind of like they sell like the little figures of Halloween figures, like the little kids trick-or-treating. I don't know. It's a oldie-timey country farmhouse kind of novelty shop. And they had the statue of a witch that looked like my mother. It was a sweet older woman in a witch's outfit, and I bought one for my mother. And then I go, God, it looks so much like Mom. I'm going to buy one for myself. So I bought two, and I have it in our living room over by the fireplace. My mother now has dementia and lives in a facility and doesn't know me. And I was thinking one day, like, something happened and I really wanted to call her and tell her, and like, oh, she would love this, but she couldn't do it, and I was just thinking about her in that way. And then the next morning, the statue of the witch had not been knocked over and was in the middle of the floor, but there was no way anything could have done that.
That's creepy and cool.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that's what happened.
Right.
I'm not saying her ghost came, because she's not dead. But it was very, very weird.
I mean, we could go into a lot of theories associated with that on another time, but
yeah. I again, just mathematically, and this is my take with. I don't want to keep you.
No, please.
This is my take with any form of fundamentalism, and I say this to fundamentalist atheists who I know that are staunch atheists. But what you're basically saying is, you think you know what happens after you die. You're an idiot. I know what happens. Nothing. It's like, well, you're just as, the analogy that I always use is my dog and the room in which that happened was gated off. So my dog did not do it.
Right.
My dog cannot conceive of my computer, but they can be in the same room at the same time. In the same way that there can be stuff that I am right in the middle of which I can have absolutely no conception.
And people have heard me say this many times, because I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't deal. Sure. There's no rule book that's come back to my knowledge, but I feel like it's kind of like, if there's a spectrum of what's going on one hand, if it's people that have absolute dogmatic certainty and belief, and on the other hand is absolute cynicism, I don't feel like either of those places are really good for me. But there's a lot of middle ground. There's a lot of space in between for possibility, as well as bad wiring and leaky faucets.
Right. Yeah.
So who knows what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of it is it's fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sad that I never got to truly meet. Well, I never met Sterling, but I've met some of his students, and I've never met didn't truly meet Nimoy. I had a virtual thing with him, like a Skype thing, but those guys, those would be the ones that I wish I could go back and chat with.
He glared at me once.
Nimoy?
Yes. I did stand up at the Saturn Awards once. And it was right around the time when it was at the point there was like Voyager had come on, and there was just too much bad Star Trek.
Right.
And I made a comment about like, Voyager's on, Deep Space Nine is on, TNG, just, and then I was like, I know they have Star Trek The Odd Couple is coming up soon. And I just kind of like, and as I walked up, he was standing there talking to Robert Wise, and they both looked at me like I had just vandalized their car. And I just kept walking.
I mean, kudos for having the very timely Odd Couple and Star Trek reference.
True. And then and Scotty yelled at me once too. I was on the Ben Stiller show, and we had James Doohan on the show because Ben's a big Star Trek fan. Big Star Trek. Ben has the Gorn head, and it's in Tropic Thunder. If you look in the agent's office in the background, the Gorn head is
there. I didn't know that, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's the original. It's the real one. Ben's owns it, and so we had James Doohan on the show, and it was right after William Shatner had done the SNL Get a Life.
Right.
Sketch. Yeah, and I said. Man, that Get a Life sketch was really funny. And he just goes, yeah, well, I know about 1.5 million Star Trek fans didn't think it was that funny. Well, I'll go fuck myself. How about that? Why don't I do that right
now? Well, it's good to be yelled at by Scotty, I think. I think that's a badge of honor. You've got two original Trek crew members that have either glared or given you a little bit of shit.
And I did. I had a lovely experience with George Takei. I had a lovely experience with Patrick Stewart, although I didn't meet him. This is a terrible story. It's like I walked on stage at the Improv. I was introduced to do stand up. Walked out on stage, looked out into the audience. Patrick Stewart. Who do you not want to bomb in front of more than Patrick Stewart? And I literally could not look at him. I went everywhere in the audience but him. And then I was told later that he was, somebody's going, no, he was laughing the whole time. He was laughing his butt off. I was like, okay, good. Then he thinks so funny. Good.
Especially because I hear he's a terrible heckler. So if you had really been going down.
Throw beer at me.
Just Shakespearean level heckler.
Yes. Forsooth. No.
Well, I'm gonna let you go, but we know that we have more hanging with Dr. Z at some point in some format.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the way.
It is not over. It is not over. And if you like the Dana Gould Hour podcast, which I do once a month, and but it's called the Dana Gould Hour, but it's usually between 2 and 3 hours long. I do one a month. That's how I do them. It's like, that's how I do them. And then I have a newsletter called the Cinemorph. That's just a twice weekly newsletter that you can sign up at danagould.bulletin.com. And it's just my stuff that I'm in, movie crap that you didn't know. The last one I wrote was, it's 1,000 words twice a week. And it's just weird stuff that you may or may not have known. For example, Alfred Hitchcock was obsessed with Tippi Hedren, and she spurned his advances, and he got her back by filming The Birds, the scene in the attic where she's attacked by birds. 5 solid days of Alfred Hitchcock throwing birds at Tippi Hedren,
just tormenting her.
Yeah, 5 days of birds thrown at you, to the point that she just said, "I'm done." And that was one story. And the next story is about how she then went on and produced one of the most dangerous animal movies of all time, Roar. Right. So her lesson was not learned.
Well, it wasn't a bird. She went on from birds to big cats. Yeah.
Jan de Botton had half his head torn off. Yeah.
Which they captured on film, right?
Yes, no, it's
Yes.
madness. People who don't know about Roar, it's madness. And I just do like, I'm doing a section now about nature's revenge films in the 70s. You know, Frog, Squirm, Food of the Gods, Day of the Animal. You know, just like, it's just, you know, cult movie crap to read on the toilet.
And it's one of these. So I grew up in Florida, and there is, I think it's Silver Springs. There's a park down there, a natural springs park, and that's where they filmed, I forget which Tarzan movie, one of the Tarzan movies in the 1930s, and they brought a bunch of monkeys in, and then they do
and then they left.
They just left. They're just like, well, you know, that's a wrap, guys. Good job. Let's pack it. Well, you know, what about the monkeys?
They'll be
leave
fine.
them. Yeah. Right. And they continue to live, and they are aggressive little MFers that yeah. And just the fact that now Florida is populated by monkeys because of Tarzan from the 1930s.
There's some story about a guy. I was a soldier in the Philippines or something, and he had a pet snake that he brought, and somehow and then this little island that had no snakes was overrun with snakes. And they killed all the birds, and then they imported a bunch of mongooses to kill the snakes, and then they get overrun with mongooses. You know,
that's a Simpsons episode.
Yeah, no, I know. I remember.
Dana, hang out backstage for a minute with me, okay? I'm going to wrap this up and come back to you, okay?
Okay, I'll be right back because I'm going to step away, but I'll be right back.
All right. Dana Gould, thank you so much. It's so much fun talking with you and just nerding out about all things Hollywood and spookiness and hanging with Dr. Z. And I'll be back with you in 2 shakes.
Right.
And guys, thank you. Dana Gould, I just could really talk to him all day long. And you guys, I hope that you liked this little chat. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to subscribe. Download each week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch these video interviews at youtube.com/DanaGeekUS. Please give me a follow. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, at Aaron Sagers, and also at TalkStrangePod on Twitter. So until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.